Well, joining us now with her take on market activity at midday is independent global market analyst Boitumelo Letsuma. Boitumelo, hi, good to chat to you once again. The market's not looking good today. Look, there is a war in the Middle East.
There certainly is a war, Ray. Thank you so much for having me. And I mean, it has been quite shocking because just last week we were hoping that a resolution would be reached between Iran and the US when we were speaking. But it looks like Iran did not hold back on its promise to retaliate ferociously in the event of an attack. And, you know, I think if you think about the key supply issues along that key route called the Strait of Hormuz route, it seems like there could be bottlenecks that are going to be experienced by exporters of oil, because roughly 20% of global oil supply is currently at risk within that route. So, yeah, I mean, if you like, I just listened to, you know, some of the podcasts and read a couple of news, and it sounds like places like the UAE as well as Qatar are privately lobbying allies to try and ensure that President Donald Trump seeks a resolution that would help, you know, keep the war a bit short, because an extended war could mean trouble.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Look, our resources, I must admit, our resources have been doing very well, but they've lost a lot of ground today. So there is that. But it's not all doom and gloom today. Let's have a look at some of those blue chip earners. Let's start with Discovery. And of course, Discovery Bank doing very well this time around.
Yes, that really was a good report. All the key earnings metrics were up by more than 24%, between 24 to 28%. And Discovery Bank accelerated its client acquisition by about 7%. And that also performed ahead of expectations, which, you know, contributed to growth in the company. And also looking at vitality, that was a key business unit that contributed to the strong performance of the company. So yeah, I like the fact that the restructured global operations within China and the UK are also working well towards turning around Discovery.
Yeah, right. So that's Discovery. Let's go and have a look now at Nedbank, up 2% overall, but they've got big projects in Kenya, and that's something to look out for.
Yes, exactly. They are still forging ahead with their East African expansion plan. And as you said earlier on, they do expect to get, you know, great improvements in the year ahead, especially in terms of, you know, the return on equity. And hopefully they can also derive some synergies from, you know, the Ikoka acquisition. And because they did, you know, receive they did experience some losses from their associate. I think it was the EcoBank sale. And so it would be interesting to see how they turn around their strategy and get better synergies within the business from their new acquisitions.
Yeah, it is a day of earnings today. ShopRite is next. I've got a whole list over here. ShopRite is next, and Checkers 6060. These guys are celebrating.
I mean, ask me about ShopRite. I already have an internal bias towards the stock, so I'm happy with the interim results. It has consistently performed well, especially against a tough macro backdrop, and they've maintained low selling prices. And you know, the 6060 platform continues to shine. They increased sales by about 34.6% to about 11.9 billion. You know, and I think what stood out for me from that report was they cited a Nielsen IQ market intelligence report, which stated that the core business grew 2.3 times more than the rest of the retail market, and it's indicative of, you know, ShopRite's industry leadership. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Sea Harvest. They've been reeling in some profits as well.
Yes, Sea Harvest did really well. You know, basic earnings almost trebling, and headline earnings was up 320%, I think. Yeah, 320%. So that's a really strong performance. And as you rightfully said earlier on, that was influenced by the higher hake catch rates. And if you look at a similar business unit, AVI, that's the stock that I follow quite closely. And they also did experience some improvements in the hake catch rates. So it seems like that part of the business is doing really well. And top line growth was only 20%. So I think it's a good management team creating, efficiencies as well as economies of scale to ensure that the business remains resilient. So yeah, really great performance.
Right, and off the back of that, we got Brimstone. There's them too.
Yes, exactly. We also had Brimstone. It seems like Sea Harvest's good performance spilled over into Brimstone. It was an interesting one for me because they increased headline earnings by about 98%, and that improved from last year's losses. But the improvement was mainly driven by Sea Harvest and the lower finance and operating costs at Brimstone. So yeah, I think overall the fact that Sea Harvest performed well, that was a good thing for Brimstone's performance.
Yeah, absolutely right. Hold that thought. Before we move on to your stock pick, let's take a moment to reflect on some counters that have found favor with your industry peers.
Taking May 26, 27 strike call options on the VIX future, just purely on this the volatility which we are seeing right now, and not knowing how long this war is essentially going to carry on for. I'm just taking that bit of a hedge into my portfolio at the moment.
The JSE themselves.
Okay.
So again, without having to stick my neck out too far in terms of the direction of this market, the one thing I do anticipate is flow and volatility and a changing of minds. Given both the robustness of the precious metal sector in particular, this is the highest quality market globally for you to get precious metals exposure, and precious metals exposure sells at the moment. And off the back of that, we've seen enormous increases in trading volumes on the JSE. And I think given what's happening in the Middle East, that trend is likely to continue.
Right, Boitumelo, let's start with VIX, the VIX call option. What are your thoughts?
Financial instruments like VIX calls, those typically rise in value when there's market volatility and when that increases abruptly. And I think it's really a sign of the times when, such instruments they provide a compelling hedging cases given the risks imposed by the rising geopolitical uncertainty, because the climate has been, quite volatile. We've seen what's been happening with Venezuela and also what could have happened with Greenland and now Iran. And so I think, as Kiarabilwe said, I'd like to view it as a strategic hedge in a broader portfolio rather than a core allocation. But I also think it's important to apply caution when implementing such complex financial instruments.
Yeah, quite right, quite right. Now the JSE, I'm loving the story of the JSE because they had great results.
They really did have great results. They released a beautiful set of results with earnings up about 16%, topping about the 1 billion mark. And I think, as my peer said, they do have a strong business model and they're well positioned to benefit from the rotation into emerging markets, given the current global uncertainty, as well as the rush into our precious metals firms. Yes, they are slightly down today, but they have been doing well. And I think with what's been happening, they could see more inflows, and trading volumes have increased on the JSE. So I think we could see a continuation of that trend. There's also the new CEO coming in. So I think all of this, positively contributes to the firm.
Yeah, quite right. Okay, what is your stock pick now?
My stock pick is Hudako Industries Limited. They specialize in importing and distributing products across various industries. And, from a financial standpoint, they have a great asset turnover. They also have a very strong balance sheet. And they've also maintained a good dividend, which is good for those who are interested in the yield, as always. And they had two key acquisitions last year, which are expected to contribute an additional 5 2.5% to earnings. So that's something to look forward to. And although margins are relatively thin, I think the PE looks quite attractive relative to the high earnings growth rate of about 15%. So yeah, I think Hudako is a good one to add to your portfolio.
Lovely. Hudako it is. Boitumelo, thank you so much. Good to see you again and chat to you on Business Lunch. Thank you. That was independent global market analyst Boitumelo Letsuma.